Technology Forum, and we're real excited that you're here. We have a very interesting, hopefully entertaining, and more importantly educational session. We're going to be opening up for questions. I got a little bit of housekeeping I've been told I need to do. So let me run through a couple of slides and then we're going to jump into the panel. Wireless Technology Forum, 13-year-old not-for-profit organization here in Atlanta, working in the mobility and wireless space. Started 13 years ago, which is why it's called Wireless and Technology. If we would have known better, we probably would have called it the Mobile Business Forum. But we're active here in Atlanta, and we invite you to our November 17th meeting. It's on projections in the future. We have a fabulous panel, and for those who are not members, we have a promo code that will get you 50% off our guest fee. We'd love to have you there, and if you'd like to know more, we'll talk to you about it in the future. Because we're not sitting in front of a group of 21s, 22s, 23-year-olds, maybe there's a couple of you, want to just take a minute to kind of set the stage. We're going to talk about gamification, virtual augmented reality, virtual worlds, and a variety of other things today. But for those of you who downloaded the Pokémon app and never used it, it's an immersive application that basically took the world by storm this summer. You point your camera at something real shows up on your camera, and it's augmented with avatars and all sorts of other things that you can do some interesting things with. It's not just a US, but it's a global phenomenon. I just saw this and I don't have anything to say about it, but let me just say it is immersive. The part we've probably all heard about is the kids walking around, young men and women walking around, some of us walking around and walking into telephone poles. But it's not just little groups. It is a crazy, wild, exciting phenomenon. All about engagement in real time, in a real world with the unreal world. It spawned a couple of challenges. Let me share with you some of the challenges, and I'm going to turn it over to Joe Conway, who's going to be our moderator of the panel. Please enjoy the session, and we'll talk to you later. Joe?
Thanks, Steve. My name is Joe Conway, the CEO of Stable Kernel, and we develop apps like this, although we haven't developed one that made this much money yet, unfortunately. One day. Steve put together these slides so that we could talk about some of the sort of alarming statistics, if you will, about Pokemon Go and the amount of adoption that it had. And I'm not going to go into all the specifics of it, but that is an amazing looking graph, right, in terms of number of users and the quick rate of adoption. And some more numbers that are just absolutely unbelievable in terms of amount of revenue generated, in terms of amount of people that are using this thing. And I think the real takeaway here is how you want to do this, right? How are you going to adopt something into the business that you do to get these types of numbers? And is augmented reality, virtual reality going to help you do that, right? And so to discuss that topic, we have a number of panelists here that all have a good understanding of this type of technology. Now I'm going to give them a moment to introduce each one of themselves, starting with Grace.
Hi, my name is Grace Ahn, and I'm the Assistant Professor of Advertising at University of Georgia and also the Director of the Games and Virtual Environments lab there. I first started investigating how virtual environments change the way that we think and behave in the physical world, I would say in 2006. Back then, the head-mounted displays that we used to be $50,000. In just 10 years, it's fallen down to about $100 to $300. And so you see how there's a great potential for application in amongst the regular consumer markets.
I'm Ed Trimble. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called FanBeat. We're a two-year-old company based here in Atlanta, and we're a mobile gaming platform for live action events, specifically sporting events. So we've created a game for sports fans to play, whether they're at the stadium or at the living room watching the game on TV. It keeps fans engaged in the game, watching more of the action, tuning in more often and for longer. We've partnered with the Atlanta Braves, with Golf Channel and NBC. We're going to market with partnering with teams, leagues, and media companies.
Great. Hi, I'm Jordan Fladell. I'm the CEO of a company called mLevel. We're also headquartered here in Atlanta. We're a company built to solve today's learning challenge that's reaching today's modern learner. As we've discussed, we're highly distracted, our heads are down, and we built a platform that basically allows companies to take their content, break it into bite-sized chunks, and then engage those learners on any device anywhere using fun things like games like Pokémon to make sure that the learners stay engaged and retain the information that they're investing in.
And again, I'm Steve Bachman with the forum. Joe, let me turn it over to you. If you click the slide once, when we get the Q&A, they'll be able to direct a pretty face to a pretty name.
Where are the pretty faces?
Oh, that's in the other, no.
So Jordan, Pokemon Go is a game, right? But you're talking about using gamification to actually do real things. What's the difference between those?
Sure. So, a game itself by design, right, is an immersive experience, right? And if you think about a game, there are lots of gamification, actually, game mechanic elements inside that actual game itself. Whether it be a leaderboard, whether it be a social currency like a badge or a star recognition. And what we have found is that if you combine, the elements of games and gamification together, you can actually get your workforce to get engaged. Because I'll just ask a simple question, right? Everyone here has probably taken some form of boring training like compliance or something where they've sent you into a room and you enter in that room and you're highly uncomfortable, right? Because you're about to go do something you really don't want to do. But if that experience changed and you were all of a sudden sent to go do this training in a game itself and you were competing with your colleagues and being rewarded, that would make that content more fun. And that's kind of, how we look at the impact of how you combine the two of them together to reach a great output.
Chris, why does that work?
Yeah, so in our laboratories, we do a lot of interesting studies on motivation. So what motivates people to do something, what demotivates them to not try to do something. Gamification is a really interesting concept because then you really have to think about, well, what exactly are you motivating this person to do? And there's been a split in a lot of the scholars' conclusions in that gamification can be a really engaging tool, but at the same time, are you teaching them to be good at the game? Or are you teaching them to be good at what they actually want to do? And so that's something that needs to be considered as you are designing these gamified mobile content.
And Ed, do you care? Because if you think about from your perspective, right, people are already enjoying this experience. It is kind of a game, they're watching a game.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, you're adding more layers of depth to it. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we're coming at it from a standpoint of taking an entertainment event, a sporting event, and making it even more engaging. And that matters. It matters for the fans who, as Jordan were pointing out, the attention spans are dropping. There's my teenage sons are great examples, right? They take their sports in bite-sized video clips at the end of a day, at the end of a Sunday. They're Falcons fans. I don't think they've watched the Falcons game the entire year, right? But they see all the Julio Jones highlights at the end of the day. So we are giving sports fans, this layer of gamification interaction to keep them engaged in the event itself, and we're getting a great response from the fans. But then turning it to the business angle, I often describe our business as not B2C like a typical gaming company, but we're B2B2C because we're partnering with Major League Baseball, we're partnering with NBC and the Golf Channel, and they're seeing some challenges in terms of declining attendance, declining ratings, aging demographic. These younger generations have lots and lots of alternatives, distractions in the form of all kinds of digital entertainment. So they're competing for those that entertainment, the attention, the focus, and FanBeat gives them a way to really kind of reel those fans back in and get them focused on the product on the field.
It's a really interesting point you brought up. There's so much digital media, there's so much access to so many things now. To compete, you kind of have to, trick people, I guess, to a certain extent, if you want to call it that, into watching your thing, and it's not about experiencing something at its whole. So what does this mean for us as a society, honestly? The fact that we kind of have to get people into gamifying their experience just to enjoy it.
I struggle with this a lot in the classrooms. That's usually the classroom can take up to 3 hours in terms of a seminar, and considering that the attention span is maybe 2 to 3 minutes. How do you deliver 3 hours of content to these freshmen who are obviously busier, have better things to do in their lives than learn about research methodology? So I think that gamification is a really good hook to get these people to be engaged. And once they discover what's inherently pleasurable in learning, then I think eventually we want to work towards kind of removing that crutch of the gamified experience. But I think it's a wonderful way to get people to be interested in the beginning.
Joe, just to follow through what Grace is saying, we're in a digital world now, but I'm not so sure if gamification hasn't been around for a long, long time. I remember in my early part of my career when I was a salesperson, I'll suggest the sales teams, the customer service teams, they've been part of gamification and reward giving. It may not be a little digital icon on your phone. It was in the old days, you became salesman in a month. You got a plaque. You got paid commissions. That's in effect the form of gamification. And in that case, Grace, I'm not so sure if we cared or if the people who are getting paid cared about how much they liked it, if they were motivated by money, and the gamification worked, it was good for the employee, it was good for the business, and maybe if they did well enough, then they could go do something else that they really like to do. So I'll argue it's been around for hundreds of years. We're just seeing a transformation of the motivational approach or the engagement approach, but we're seeing it in some ways that I've never imagined, and I think a lot of us.
Yeah. And Jordan, you have probably metrics about this type of information, don't you?
Well, but the funny thing is you brought something, Steve. Gamification is not new at all. We've given it a label, and I always think labels come from venture capitalists so they can find a way to rally around investors. Think about what is in the travel industry, right? The travel industry has been gamifying us for years, right? There are people who book a reservation on a specific airline for pay extra $100 to ensure they get their miles. They'll stay at a certain hotel to ensure they get benefits. Now, with the mergers of all these massive airlines and massive hotels, we're seeing some consolidation and some loss of value in that, but we called it a loyalty program back then, right? So gamification as a whole is not new. It's being applied to because some companies are now taking the extra leap of putting games around that gamification, right? Gamification is a motivator. Why do I want this person to go do X? Right, to get them to go do Y. But I have to ensure, and you brought this up, that I'm also incorporating some value in this asset, right? Am I going to drive learning, right, through that process and measure the learning and outcomes with that, right? So just doing gamification for the sake of gamification there's no value to it. And I think if you look at the travel industry, it's the greatest model we have. They have figured out the value prop. They can get someone to book an airline ticket at a higher price on their airline to get a benefit, somewhat a benefit if you fly too big of an airline, right, to do that. It's say they're a hotel, right? I'll stay at a Marriott versus staying at a Hampton Inn, and the reason I'll do that is maybe the hotel's better, but also because I want to keep my reward status up, right? And there's a value proposition, right? Eventually you get, on an airline, you might one day get an upgrade to a first class seat. At a hotel, you get access to the concierge floor, right? These things are perks that matter to the people who are investing in these programs, and that's kind of where the root of gamification, the data we see as well, is if you get the roots and value, you get.
And you're right, it has been around for quite some time. It's about adding an additional incentive or something that's probably more long term, but I bet you've seen it change a lot in the last couple of years, especially in your industry.
I was going to say, I agree with everything that was said. I think you also can't lose sight of the fact that technology is enabling things today that they weren't doable even 5 years ago. And our business, FanBeat's a great example of that. I first had the idea 9 or 10 years ago and realized that not only was the market not there, but the technology wasn't there to really execute on the vision of having this real-time, interactive, next play, game tied into sporting events. And then about 3 years ago, I came back to the idea and realized that some developments around the mobile device, around the notifications and networking infrastructure and delivery of content, that now you could create a game like FanBeat, where on a Sunday afternoon, I can push a question to millions of mobile devices around the world simultaneously with a 30-second timer with integrity, and those millions of devices are going to submit an answer back to me in 30 seconds, and I'm going to be able to score all those and push out a leaderboard back to those millions of devices. You couldn't do that even 5 years ago. So I think that, and Pokémon Go is absolutely another example of that, the way they're leveraging location services and other things that they did. Technology is evolving to allow us to do things that we could only imagine a few years ago.
Makes a lot of sense. So, let's go to the cards. Let's find one of the questions here. within gamification, there's this concept of avatars, right? In Pokemon Go characters, yourself even. How does that play into how a brand can sort of tap into?
So if you look at the most recent graphs of Pokemon Go, it looks like most of the people who joined Pokemon Go simply for the game have eventually fallen out. So there was this humongous increase right at the beginning, and then right now they plateaued and decreased even. There was a point where a lot of people were talking, well, is Pokemon Go not a thing anymore? But what's really interesting is that the people who originally were fans of Pokemon Go, so the people prior to Pokemon Go, if they already had an existing relationship with that character, with that digital content, those are the people who are ongoing players, and they're a little bit more loyal to this entire gamification of Pokemon Go. It's kind of like if you were a fan of a media character for a really long time, and now you have that media character in your hands, in your palm. I mean, that's an amazing experience.
Or an athlete.
Yeah, or an athlete. So if there is an existing fan base, then the loyalty tends to extend for a really long time. Whereas if you join simply for the gamified process, then it's very likely that the novelty wears off. And once the novelty wears off, then there's really no reason for these people to go running around, because they didn't really enjoy the exercise part of things. They were just joining it for the novelty. And then they're kind of like, well, I don't really want to exercise. And
it's kind of what Jordan said about gamification for the sake of gamification, right? And Pokemon Go is just a very thin layer. So, I mean, this kind of echoes the thing that you were saying about.
I think anytime you create a personalized experience and create value out of it, you're going to get a long-term return. I think Pokemon Go is a great example. If you went to the Prado in Sandy Springs about 3 months ago, you couldn't find a parking spot or walk around because, and you would walk around, you had to make sure you weren't running into somebody with their head down on their phone.
Right.
But now if you go back to that parking lot, it's no longer crowded anymore, right? And so what's the change? Did the game change? No, I think, and like anything, it's like when you ride a wave, right? I'm going to ride a wave, it's going to be really hot, I want to be a part of it. And then all of a sudden that wave drops off. So the avatar, I think, allows you to create a personalized or a second life experience. For those people who want the second life experience, they're going to stay with that longer. And essentially they've gotten that other value prop from it, right? And that's why it's important when you look at building a game or incorporating gamification, you lock into what the long-term core value is, what the person gets in return beyond the moment of that interaction of being part of that small wave.
Yeah, and what's interesting about waves, sports is one place where there's always waves. Your team's up or down, right? I'm sure there's some Georgia fans in here, and you're feeling pretty down right now. But do you see different engagement levels based on how well a team is doing, perhaps? I mean, geography.
Absolutely. So, we are, our business is in many ways dependent on the product on the field, the excitement of the teams that are on the field, but we can also help drive that, help fuel that. I'll mention the Braves here, one of our very first partners. They're an extremely innovative organization in Major League Baseball, and a number of examples. Greg Mize and Adam Zimmerman, the marketing team there, they've wanted to be out in front of the market and really test new technologies, new fan offerings like FanBeat. And understand from that, what appeals to fans, how can we create a better experience for them at the stadium, keep them more engaged with the team, with the players. And so they were a very early adopter of FanBeat. Unfortunately, a little bit of a disappointing year this year, but we're looking ahead to the new stadium next year in SunTrust Park, and we're really excited to continue to partner with them on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get another question going here. We're going to take it over to Jordan. What kind of impact have you seen in organizations that have used this?
So it's interesting. We get to see a lot of data about how our clients, what the impact we make from the learning programs that we build using our platform. What we get is we get to hear feedback directly from the learner. The learners are excited to learn in a different way that addresses what their biggest challenge is, right? If we all work in any large environment or any corporate structure, time is not an asset we have tons of. And so when they're able to get real-time feedback and see where their knowledge gaps are, it allows them to have an impact in their day-to-day lives. And we'll get quotes from them time, hey, I didn't even know I knew this information. I want to be in a sales call. And a client asked me a question, and I was able to answer the question. They said, I didn't realize I learned that piece of information. So it's really neat to see that we've kind of demystified the learning process. Right now, everybody loves going to school, right? I'm sure a lot of people in this room who love sitting in the classroom and have a passion for learning, right? Love coming to class and are fire students, but for every one of those, there's going to be 9 others who went into that classroom under duress, right? And mostly they're in the field of sales, customer service, and they haven't immersed themselves, right? And so this is where we tend to see thriving real-time results, or in HR onboarding, right? Life through a fire hose. Here, join our company. We're going to tell you everything you know about our company, and 4 days later, you're going to become productive, right? You remember absolutely nothing. And so when clients come back and say, hey, people are retaining key information, that's when we see the data and the results and really good benefits from that.
And that's where I'm seeing in companies we work with is people are learning in different ways. The new media, the new technology, it's less classroom, lecture, test, maybe a lab, classroom, lecture, test. It needs the learning process for employees, the learning process for clients and customers needs to be all immersive now, because there's an expectation, and it's not just the millennials, it's up and down the organization. I think we're all understanding that there are better ways to leverage what some of the technologies and some of the capabilities of today in this digital world can really bring all of us from a value proposition.
And what's interesting is you guys are kind of using this out in the field and trying to use it, but as we know, you guys are the folks that start these things, right? You start thinking about them and then people figure out how to turn it into money, right? So what is the research, what direction is your research pointing you in right now in terms of things that perhaps they can adopt into their businesses?
So the really interesting things about virtual worlds is, we talked about, it allows for a lot of things that were either difficult or impossible in the past. And one would be looking at avatars and how you're able to create self-avatars. So just with 2 digital photographs, I can create an avatar that looks just like you. And just think about that ramification. So if you, let's say, log into anyone's social media account, free public photos everywhere. So I can essentially create any avatar of anyone that looks exactly like that person, but there's a decoupling of how that person looks like and how that person behaves. So I can create a avatar of everyone on this panel and have them dance. I could create an avatar of everyone in the audiences and have you guys do whatever I want. And so when that happens, then you have to think about the meaning of identity in virtual worlds. And so I study a phenomenon that I call self-endorsing. So I can go on and flip on the television and see my virtual self, tell my physical self, and try to sell me a product or a brand and say, Grace, I know you because you are me and I'm you. And I know that you like this product. And can people say no to themselves, to an avatar that looks exactly like you? Can you say no to a person that looks exactly like you? And most often than not, it's really hard. It's because everyone wants to feel good about themselves. It makes you sleep better at nights. There's a phenomenon in social psychology called better than average effect. So you think that you're slightly better in terms of intelligence, in terms of appearance. You want to be better than the average Joe or the average Jane, and it helps us cope with day-to-day living. And when you can't say no to yourself, then what can we do in terms of the persuasion effect with these avatars? And it's a little bit frightening in a sense.
Yeah, well, because everyone has their own personal struggles, whatever that happens to be, and it's you not telling no to yourself. So now you're telling me a company can put a hologram of me that's going to tell me these things, and I'm going to.
And it's kind of like you're looking at you, and you're like, sure, I'll listen to you because you're the most credible person I know.
That's unreal. That's kind of scary.
Yeah, you have to think about what's coming in the future for a lot of these advertisements.
Didn't we see that on the presidential debates?
Yeah.
Well, at least the unreal part.
Have you seen that show Westworld on HBO, anyone? It's sort of talking about this concept of a virtual world and how, but it's kind of weird because you're right, there is this decoupling between what is real and what isn't, and the incentives are different, but they're trying to get you to have incentives in real life. I mean, I'm sure you guys, that's kind of what you're going after here. You're a team where sports, you're seeing long-term decline in viewership, right? And so you're saying, listen, if we do this short-term feel-good thing, people are going to jump back into it, and they stick with it longer term. Is that sort of what you're going for?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the results we saw coming out of the Ryder Cup pilot that we did with Golf Channel were pretty phenomenal in terms of On average, players were in the game an hour and 29 minutes for each of the 5 discrete Ryder Cup sessions. And then what got people even more excited was seeing the link to the ratings. So 51% of people that played FanBeat during the Ryder Cup watched more Ryder Cup coverage because of the game. 31% watched 5+ hours more. So think about that. Almost a third of the people playing this game said, I'm going to invest more than 5 additional hours of my weekend in watching this Ryder Cup coverage. So that's very exciting and validating, and says, you know, this can not only be a fun, cool digital experience on the side, but now it can begin to impact the main event, the broadcast, the golf coverage itself.
And we see that too in a corporate education world. Like we're seeing 20+ time engagements from people learning about basic subjects, things like anti-money laundering policies, right? You couldn't get a room of financial people being trained in compliance to read that 20 times if you put a gun to their head, but put it in game format, and they'll play it 20 times, right? And think about that, right? We're taking content that's mundane and making it engaging. It's not that the Ryder Cup is a mundane experience, right? But we all know the challenge of getting someone to watch golf who's not an enthusiastic person about golf, right? And that's the real value proposition. If you get someone to repeat that engagement with passion, right, and see those numbers, that you're going to see a tremendous return on your investment, whether you're in the media business or you're in the education business.
And I see this from a management perspective. None of us have a problem with our raving fans or our raving employees. I mean, and you mentioned University of Georgia. They're still filling the seats, and they always fill the seats, ups and downs. But the raving fans are the easy ones. The raving employees are the easy. It's unfortunately none of us have 100% of them. So it's very exciting to see that there are ways to now motivate and bring those folks that are average or above average, and provide some tools and solutions for them and some experiences for them that can get them more engaged. Not only watching a recreational activity as Ed, or walking around the parking lot with Pokémon, but you can bring that into your corporate world, and you can actually improve the performance of your organization, which makes the people happy, the management team happy, and the shareholders happy. So, I'm seeing a real win in bringing this inside the organization and using it as a tool, as well as an external engagement with trying to promote your brand and getting external engagement as well.
And I think that's because we've just changed the society, right? I don't know how many people took Uber here today. Right? We have an on-demand way to get a car to bring us wherever we want to go.
Yeah.
We have an on-demand way to set a reservation. We basically expect things to be at our fingertips, and when it's not, we've kind of become disinterested in it. Right? And so that expectation has changed. If that expectation has changed, the only challenge we have left is to figure out how we evolve to make all things on an on-demand world, right? Because otherwise people will find alternatives.
And what's interesting, I was thinking about is, for the last few minutes here, it's sort of this optimization, right? You're optimizing your life to have things on demand. You're optimizing your life to have always these really great things. It's kind of like when you're addicted to heroin, right? You're optimizing to get more heroin. Is this type of stuff? But that's not good for you, right? And so I wonder, if we're creating all these optimizations, we're doing all these things, is it really what's actually good for us?
You all can answer that question.
The science of whether it's good for us or not is probably subject for debate. We'll find out later. Right? I think the cat's out of the barn, whatever, the ship's already sailed, whichever analogy you'd like to use here. This world has changed. So it's now a matter of whether we change with it, or the next generations behind us will change it for us, right? Because the technology is not going to get more enabled. The virtual realities, the artificial realities, the enablement, location services, there's going to be more capabilities you can deliver, right? And so we just have to continue to push ourselves to evolve. We're like that laggard generation, right, who's now figuring out how do we help people innovate in a safe and smart way, and we're going to make mistakes along the way, that's for sure.
And have we seen anything in terms of, have you seen anything, it talks about how the brain works in regards to this?
Yeah, the human brain is a really flexible organ, and it's really interesting. We back when I was at the Stanford laboratories, we used to study a phenomenon called the human lobster. So we can give people virtual arms and legs so that you have 8 limbs instead of 4, And just with a few minutes of practice, people go around as if they were born with 8 limbs. And so the human brain is really able to kind of adjust to those abilities. And these mobile platforms and the virtual platforms do give ways for human beings to enhance their abilities, to really kind of take the perspective of others, to look at a world that they've never experienced before, and the human brain is ready to absorb all of that. And I was just looking, I have a 5-year-old, and he is now born into a world where virtual reality always existed. I mean, that just blows my mind. And the fact that these kids will grow up with a generation of these augmented realities and virtual realities, of capabilities that the human mind has never seen before, is mind-boggling.
You mentioning heroin earlier. I have read.
I won't tell my students that.
Right here, let me know.
There is